Let's go to control. Control is an incredibly complicated and important piece of this, especially if we're going to be trauma-informed, but it is relevant for everybody. The literature that I'm going to be drawing from under control, I want you to know, comes mostly from the parenting literature. I do not know if there's a parallel body of literature that talks about the things I'm talking about within schools. But I think that you will see parenting styles reflected very similarly in the kinds of styles that teachers have as well. So let's remember that there are two C's that are most affected by trauma are connection. If the person who is trying to protect you is in fact harming you, then your sense of connection, your sense of trust with other human beings will never be the same. For that reason, I need you to know that one of the most important things you can do for kids who are traumatized, for kids who have difficult lives at home, is just be an adult who cares. You are restoring that kid's vision in humanity merely by your presence. All right? But the other thing that you can do is not just work on the connection, but really understand control with kids. Let's first, to give them back control, let's not undermine their competence. And some of this is review, and then I'm going to give you a new topic. Number one, allow mistakes. Mistakes are what allow you to pick yourself up, to figure something else out, and that therefore give you control over your environment. We talked about praising effort, not results. Remember, telling a kid the bottom line is you are this gives them no sense of control. Saying you did this and therefore this was the outcome gives them control in a very large way. Next, we have to recognize how a traumatized person thinks. A traumatized person is always waiting to be attacked, does not trust people, and assumes that you do not value their opinion or they have no sense of agency over their action. Next, we have to talk in a way that all people are going to understand. To understand this, I want you to remember how kids think. So first, I am a 5-year-old. As a 5-year-old, I am a concrete thinker. As a concrete thinker, I see things exactly as they are within the box, right? Concrete. You break it in half, what is it? It's 2 pieces of concrete. It's not very complicated. As a concrete thinker, do I think about future consequences of current behaviors? No. If I give you $1.25 and I say to this 5-year-old, I suggest you get you're welcome to get a Snickers bar if you want, but I strongly suggest investment in a 529 plan, right? So that 5-year-old is not thinking about the future. How does a 5-year-old view people? People are good or bad, depending on what? What are you going to do for me? Because I am an egocentric thinker. It is all about me. So, how do you decide if someone's good or bad? Is that cookie for me? You must be a good person. You're not going to let me have the cookie? You must be a bad person. Or, my mommy says you're a bad person. Okay? Speaking of which, another thing that I worry about for little kids is how much we are making people scared of strangers. Right? We are defining people as good or bad, and good is people you know, and bad is people you don't know. When we do that, do you understand how dangerous this is for healthy development? The truth is that in times of crisis, if a parent is not there, that child is almost always going to have to rely on a stranger. And if they automatically assume that a stranger is dangerous, we are undermining our children. Do you get that? So I worry about that. What we have to do instead is we have to give our little kids stranger skills. So the most important stranger skill to have as a small child is if you are in trouble, look for a woman with a child and go to that person and say, I can't find my mommy. A woman with a child is your safest thing as opposed to everybody. All right? With that said, so now you see why it's so dangerous to be a child, right? It's very dangerous to be a child. So what do? We watch us. We protect me as a child. Now, I'm walking through adolescence, where you should be watching me closer than ever, but you're not. And now, I'm an adult. Same height, but now I'm an adult. How do I think now? If that was abstract thought, what is this? No, I'm sorry, I just gave you the answer. If that was concrete thought, this is abstract thought, meaning I understand nuance, I understand complexity. I understand that what happens to me now is going to affect me in the future. It is highly protective for me to understand what happens to me now could affect me in the future. And how do I view people? Are people now good or bad? Is it that simple? Suppose someone notices how exquisitely handsome I am, and they take me out to dinner, and they're incredibly kind and incredibly generous and flattering. During dinner, they tell me to get the most expensive stuff on the menu. They couldn't be nicer to me. And then after dinner, we go for a walk, and they buy me new sneakers, and they buy me a new sweater, and then they ask to touch little Ken. What do I say? What do I say? Okay, do you guys need help with this one? All right. Why do I say no? What do I understand about that person's generosity, about their flattery, and about their kindness? What do I understand? That it's manipulative, that it's conditional. Do you understand how protective it is for me to understand that what I'm doing now can affect the future and that this person's kindness is conditional? It is hugely, hugely protective. This is how I think as an adult. Now let's understand how I got here and when I stay here. So number one, only 85% of people reach abstract thought. 15% of people will never get here. Number two, traumatized people or anybody who's stressed always thinks concretely. And you can have the brightest kid, but when they're called into your office and you're thinking of expelling them, they are running from a tiger. And when we are parents and we are yelling at our kids, they are running from a tiger, and they can't think. Next, brain development is a developmental process. You cannot think abstractly or early in childhood. And then, when adolescence begins to strike, you can begin to think abstractly only then. All right? So your brain is changing, right? And what else is happening besides your brain changing during adolescence that makes you understand that there are conditions on behaviors and that people can be full of crap? What else happens? You have experiences, right? There's the biologic changes, which I heard, which is related to the brain changes, but you have experiences. So I'm a 15-year-old girl, and a guy comes up to me, and he says, "I love you." Do I say, I question the veracity of that statement, right? So what do you say instead? "Well, I love you too." And then the guy says, "Well, you know what? Words aren't good enough between us." And then they make love. And where is he the next day? He's gone. And she moves from here to here towards the safety of adulthood. She will never again fall for that particular line, all right? But she will fall for others. And she will continue to have a series of life experiences, and with each life experience, she will become wiser and wiser, and her cognitive wheels will become oiled. And there's no better way to learn. There is absolutely no better way to learn than for a kid to make lots of mistakes and get themselves up. The problem is, these are our daughters, these are our sons, these are our pupils, and we don't want them to learn in this way. So what do? We tell them. We understand the complexity of human nature. Gosh, we understand that people can be full of crap. We understand that what you do now can affect your entire life. So what do? We tell them. So how do we tell them? We tell them in a lecture. Don't you know that what you're doing right now, which I'm going to call behavior A, could easily lead to consequence B? I never imagined my little girl doing consequence B or even doing behavior A, and now I look at you and I wonder what's between your ears besides cobwebs. Well, if B happens, you're more than likely to go on to consequence C, which is a slippery slope to consequence D, which I never ever thought you were going to do. But then you began hanging out with Margaret, whose own mother doesn't love her, and you're letting her influence you. If consequence D happens, you're going to go on to consequence E, which could be a slippery slope to consequence F. If consequence F happens, I can't even... Look at me, young man, when I'm talking to you, because this isn't for my own good. If consequence F happens, you're going to go into consequence G, which could be a go to consequence H, which sometimes, just sometimes, will go on to consequence I. And do you know what happens then? You die. And what does the kid hear? Womp, 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 you die. So they get the condescension of your message. They get your anger. They get that you do not believe that they are capable, but they do not understand a word that you're saying. Why? Listen again. A goes to B, which goes to C. There are several intervening variables that will make a difference to the ultimate outcome. That's algebra. You cannot teach algebra. Are you an algebra teacher? Okay. You cannot teach algebra to someone who is not cognitively equipped. You cannot teach algebra to someone whose brain has not begun changing. This was the beginning of my crash. I'm in algebra because all the smart kids were in algebra, but I was 3 years away from puberty. My brain wasn't ready to adapt algebra, and that began making me crash. You can't do it. What you can do is you can speak in a simple mathematical cadence to kids. You can be running from a tiger and someone can say, what's 1 plus 2? And you can be running and still say 3. Because your brain, when it comes to concrete things that you can see and touch, is using a different part of your brain that it can access very easily. In times of crisis, you cannot access the Pythagorean theorem. You can't. All right? So, what we want to do is the conversation wants to look something like this. You're thinking about doing behavior A. I think I get it, but I'm not going to lie to you because sometimes I really worry that that can go to consequence B. I want to make sure that you've thought this through and have some sort of plans, making sure that they know that they're the expert in their lives, that you have some sort of plans. I listen, I congratulate, I guide, and I invite. I say, there's one more thing that I can think of. Do you want to hear from me or not? And when they're at B, and only when they're at B, do I take them to C. So that I've changed my mathematical cadence. I'm a facilitator. They figure it out, they figure it out, they figure it out. They've got it, they get it, they own it. Who's the expert in the room? They are. Who owns the solution? They do. They feel large rather than small. They feel competent, and they feel in control. Let me give you an example. These examples are pretty dramatic. This is a 14-year-old girl who is in a school-based clinic that I'm running many years ago. She has a blood dot on her eye called a scleral hemorrhage. We have school nurses in the room? No? So we have scleral hemorrhage, so there's nothing that it's the easiest intervention in the world. You just go like, oh, darling, your eye's going to be fine. But I was bold, and I asked her what happened. And she said she got in a fight. And I asked her what made her mad enough to fight. There's only 4 answers to what makes you mad enough to fight. One answer is, well, they insulted me. That's someone who has a very low anger threshold or is highly reactive or traumatized. The next is they messed with my mother or my boys if they're in a gang. After that is he stepped up to me, which is what happened when Curtis and I were standing together, that male posture, that stepping up to someone. And the last is he put his hands on me. And everybody fights when you put your hands on them. Okay? So what made you mad enough to fight? I went on a class trip to New York, and I bought this T-shirt, and it cost $12.50, and I thought it looked really, really good. And then I wore it to school, and this girl called me fat, and I wasn't going to take that. But that didn't make me mad enough to fight. But then she called my mother a garden tool, and I was not going to take that. So now you know she's in a fight. She's in your office. What do you need to know now before she leaves your office? What do you need to know? How about what's going to happen now? Is this over? And she said, I'm going to kill her. That's why I brought this knife to school today. She's dead. Now, does she really want to kill her? No, because she didn't expect me to go like, is it appropriately sharpened? Right? So she wants to be rescued. But if I don't rescue her in the right way, this could backfire terribly. So can you imagine the lecture? You brought a knife to school today and you're going to kill her. Well, how does your mom feel about this? Remember, you're doing this to defend your mom's honor. Then you're going to end up in jail, and then you're going to, when you're in jail, are you going to have any kids? Are you going to get a good job? Your whole life is flying before your eyes. Give me 2 reasons not to give her the lecture. So she's not going to hear it, that's 1. She's got a knife, exactly. Exactly. So here is my whole violence history. In 7th grade, there's this guy who's sitting next to me who, for what it's worth, grew up to be a neurosurgeon, okay? And so he's sitting behind me, he turns around and he punches me in the arm, and I cried. That's my violence history. And yet I work with kids who are incredibly tough. So if I'm going to do the in-your-face stuff, I got to know I'm going to trigger them. That's dumb. Love never backfires. Respect never backfires. Trying to be too cool or too dramatic can and is a big mistake. So I said, let's think this through. I want you to keep your knife in your pocket. And then I began drawing out on the pieces of paper. This is called a decision tree. And I do it on the Don't Make Me Dirty papers, but you can do it on any paper. And I say, keep your knife in your pocket, but here's a pen. And I want you to slowly stab me so we can think this through. She goes to stab me. I take it out of her hand, and I stab her in the back. And I said, so one possibility is that you fight, but she ends up using her knife first. And then you get stabbed in a really important part of your body that you're not able to use again. And you end up what's called maimed, and you're not going to be able to walk again. So again, she's not in the room, but you got to trust me. I'm doing 20% of the talking. I'm just putting out short staccato statements, and she's filling in the story. Had you considered the possibility that this would happen today? No, but could it happen? Well, it won't. Well, do you know anybody who it's happened to? Well, there's this guy in my block who's in a wheelchair because he got stabbed, and there's this woman around the corner has to go poop in a bag because she got all cut up. Well, how do you think that happened? I don't know. Well, do you think that they woke up in the morning and they said, I know I'm going to be in a wheelchair today? Well, that's stupid. Well, then how did it happen? I don't know. Things got out of hand. But things aren't going to get out of hand for you? No. Well, what do you want to have happen? I want her dead. Okay, let's do it again. She goes to stab me. I take it out and I stab her in the heart. So you fight, but she uses her knife first. You're stabbed in the heart. What should we call this? Dead. Had you considered the possibility that you were going to be dead? No. But could it happen? It won't. Well, what do you want to have happen? I want her dead. Okay, she's dead. How do you feel? She said, good or happy, I forget. And I said, how long do you feel happy for? Think like a 14-year-old. 14. All day. All day. Or in 2015, it would be a minute, right? All day. And I said, what happens after that day? And what she said to me is, I get probation. And I said, no, actually, this is first-degree murder. You're going to end up in jail for a long time. And then I said, you know, you did this to defend your mom's honor. How's your mom feeling? And she realized how ashamed her mom would be. When you're in jail, are you going to be able to finish your education? No education. When you're in jail, are you going to have kids? Not all of it's on here just because it didn't fit on the slide, but what I'm telling you is accurate. Are you going to have kids? No kids. When you get out of a jail, are you going to be able to get a good job? She was going to get no job. She took it all the way out, further than I would have for dramatic effect, but she took it all the way out to dying alone and poor, right? But is that realistic for if you commit murder when you're 14? This is what your life can look like. Suppose you don't kill her. Suppose you don't fight. How do you feel? Angry. How long do you feel angry for? And she said, all day. And like seriously, I could not make this stuff up. Okay? So what happens? She finished school, we let her have kids, and we let her make her mom proud. 2 lives saved. Is that brilliant? Thank you very much. My point is that there's no brilliance to it whatsoever. It's a lecture. Do you see it? It is a lecture. I don't have to teach you anything new. Remember I told you I'm going to teach you nothing today? I'm going to reinforce what instinctually you already know. You absolutely could have had this conversation. But what would have happened is it would have been delivered in a conversational tone. And even if you were trying not to be histrionic, her angst would have made you escalated. And therefore, you would have been feeding off each other until it would have gotten too inflamed. By controlling it in this decision tree process, who's the expert in the room? She's the expert. Who owns the solution? She does. It is merely a lecture.